Is that next one?
It's open, but I picked it up from the phone.
I'm not I will continue. I will do
Jail.
Then it hit everybody else.
But there you're confined.
And then secondly, rather than going to the board on the middle of May, we'll be going to the board on September 15th. And then the board's actions will be incorporated in the final phase, the supplemental changes phase of the 2021 county budget process. So the rationale for these changes is really twofold. The first, and the reason that cross-cuts both of the changes, is that we want to have the best possible information about the available revenue, both Measure H and related non-Measure H revenue, before coming forward to the board with these recommendations. Because though the recommendations only relate directly to Measure H, we're of course exist in a context. So for example, new state funding to combat homelessness is quite relevant as we think about the deployment of Measure H funding. And in fact, the county administered share of HAP funding, the Homeless Housing Assistance Program funding, which is the $650 million that is included in the current year state budget, and in which the county is receiving about 65, our use of half of that money will be included with our Measure H funding recommendations because it is essentially a direct supplement to Measure H. As I alluded to earlier, we are fully allocated in the current year. That is, we have allocated in the current year all of the carryover funding from the prior 2 years. At the same time, we have growing costs in 2 areas, in permanent supportive housing and interim housing, which are unavoidable. In interim housing, we have a number of facilities that will be opening where the county is bearing the capital costs and is the only source of funding for operating costs. And then the bigger number is in permanent supportive housing, where the county is committed to fund the intensive case management services and other related service costs, like tenancy support services, for all new project-based and tenant-based supportive housing in the county. The good news is that there's a lot of that. The sort of consequence of that, however, is that more Measure H funding will be needed in 2021 and each year thereafter to meet that obligation. So absent a growth in the pie, that would require offsetting reductions in other areas of the budget. So in that context, we want to be sure that we know as much as possible about the funding that will be available next year, both other non-Measure H funding, such as the new state funding that we were talking about previously, as well as to have the best information available on Measure H revenue, and probably more significant in terms of potential range is the level of any Measure H underspending in the current year that could be a funding source for the future. Additionally, our board believes that the annual point-in-time count should be taken into account in developing Measure H funding recommendations. So, since the point-in-time count results will not be available until the end of May, this time frame will allow us to incorporate that into the draft funding recommendations that we'll release on about June 20th, which will initiate a public engagement process comprised of electronic public comments, a webinar to explain the thinking of the Measure H leads from the county departments and agencies which administer Measure H funding. So that will begin the process. And then there'll be both a public hearing in the Board of Supervisors hearing room and an electronic public comment process. The leads will reconvene based on that input, decide whether to recommend any modifications, and then in early August we'll release recommended final proposed recommendations or final recommendations, which will then be discussed with the board's homeless policy deputies in mid-August and ultimately go to the board on September 20th.
Another year by. That's what he said.
Oh, and if I could just say, just one more comment on the process. As we previously shared, we undertook a very robust public engagement process in September through November, which consisted of 8 policy summits that brought together over 300 invited government and community experts on various topics like prevention and interim housing and so forth. One community listening session in each service planning area, which we convened in partnership with LASA, and then an electronic public comment process. And all of that constitutes a very important input to the process of developing these funding recommendations. And we recently transmitted to the board, and I know that Romina shared with you, a memo which transmitted hard copies of the policy summit information and the community listening sessions and a link to the electronic public comment.
It's good to see that the state is stepping up with funding this year and next year, I believe. What is the strategy from your standpoint with respect to treating that money as one time or as ongoing?
That is a very good question, and it's not a new question. I mean, when the Board of Supervisors approved one-time $100 million in one-time county general fund and state and federal funding administered by the county in February 2016, it was one-time funding, and we acted as if it was ongoing. Because if it hadn't, then we wouldn't have been able to do what was most necessary, like build out outreach teams and fund rapid rehousing, which essentially laid the foundation in for the passage of Measure H. So we took the risk of treating one-time money as if it were ongoing funding, and the risk paid off in voter approval of Measure H, where we now have an ongoing funding source for 10 years. The vast majority of what we spend, what's needed to combat homelessness are ongoing costs, with the exception of capital. So, now that said, there's different kinds of ongoing costs. A commitment to permanent supportive housing is essentially an indefinite cost, even for a given person or family, where something like rapid rehousing, it's temporary for a given person, but of course we're building out an infrastructure, we have staff that are employed and so forth.
That's right. She showed it to me.
We'll have to make that judgment, but we're essentially
Probably have a
in
copy.
a dynamic where, as I mentioned, particularly for permanent supportive housing, our costs are inherently growing. So absent additional funding, we would have to make curtailments elsewhere in Measure H funding. If we receive additional funding from the state, even if it's one-time funding, which we hope it won't be, we hope it'll be ongoing, we can use that to essentially offset that inherent growth and forestall or hopefully ultimately avoid any curtailments elsewhere. So in the case of HAP, we're using that HAP funding in the county almost exclusively for that growth in PSH costs and interim housing operations. So it's for an ongoing cost, but it's an ongoing cost we would incur otherwise. It's not really a new ongoing cost. I mean, it's new because it's inherently expanding, but the consequence of using the one-time funding that way is to delay and hopefully avoid curtailments, which would otherwise be necessary.
This is how the LAPD can be taken out.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you so much.
Okay.
Romina, do we have public comment on this item?
We have 2 people that signed up, George Buzetti and Tori Bailey.
Go ahead.
I think,
The exact date that the funding recommendation will be released.
So the release for public comment is currently targeted for June 20, but that is not a precise date. The board deputies will consider the final recommendations on August
No problem. Go ahead.
14th and the board on September 15th.
Want to hear from you guys.
Good afternoon. I'm Tori Bailey. I like what Mr. Angel said about incorporating some suggestions from the homeless council, because I've been doing it for the past 8 years, and I feel like who actually gets this information and who sees the data and the experiences and the encounters that we do. One of the things is I'm a little disappointed that you allowed LASA to go without giving an answer for averages. Anytime you work with anything, any industry, there's numbers. There could have been a response of an average of how many has been placed in the last 3 years. We should know that off the top of our head if we're really in the service to help people. The other thing is the lack of stats. There should be other modes of outreach other than the grant process that they have in place. We have direct experience with helping the homeless with placements with our own dime. We put them in hotels for vouchers. We've had seniors that's been scammed out of their $1 million houses, tricked into reverse mortgages. There's a lot going on out here. And there's no way somebody's been living in luxury living, all of a sudden on the street homeless, we pick them up starving because they've been locked out of their house illegally. So there's a lot going on out here, and it's not the norm. It has nothing to do with mental illness, alcohol, and drugs. So I just need you to know that there should be a prevention hub where all these agencies should be interactive and proactive with that not ever happening again. And then you have 96 councils. I don't know exactly how many have a homeless liaison such as myself, but I know there's at least 50. And they are the liaison to the city. There should be some direct inclusiveness and interaction with each and every one of us who are willing. And this is one of my teammates that we do victims of crime.
Thank you. I'd like to agree with what she's saying. In the video, well, first of all, I'd like to say that I came to Los Angeles in 1969, and that was when the Black Panthers were trying to help the homeless, and one of their slogans was "Power to the people."
Right.
And so it's interesting, all these years later, power by the people. The homeless, while I'm sitting here, I'm getting calls from the people that we're trying to help. And my phone, you probably saw me leave a couple of times. We've got senior citizens, and well, you know, they just showed you a video, example one. What I thought was interesting in the video was the first thing that they did to help the lady was to put her up in a motel. And one of the cases that she kind of just described was a senior citizen who was an icon, an American icon. She went to Vietnam with Bob Hope, and we were trying to get her house off the street, and we couldn't find any resource for a one-night stay on a Friday evening. And I've been saying this repeatedly to every meeting almost I go to. I said, you know, these tragedies of homelessness a lot of times happen on Friday evening after everybody's gone home. And then the Samaritans that these people we're talking about are the ones that are out there trying to help. And it's frustrating to look at these numbers of hundreds of millions of dollars, even billions of dollars, knowing that sometimes $95 or $50 can make the difference between life and death. And often, and Bill, I mean, your office has been helpful. I deal with victims of crime, and mainly, but most of what I deal with are the unusual, dire, and exceptional. And so when at these meetings, when they talk about the regular homeless that everybody sees and the dissidents that you see, but the unusual, dire, and exceptional, they're like one step, death is at their door. And so we're out there, Good Samaritans, and not having access to these budgets. I mean, the grant process, by the time I can go through the grant process,
They'll be dead.
the people I'm dealing with would be dead. Anyway, I appreciate the meetings, and I also, especially your assistant, Phil, who has been very helpful to me in the past. And these meetings have been very informative. Thank you.
They need weekend outreach too and coverage. That's one thing they can do with them.
Mrs. Betty, did you like to
Go George, go George.
Excellent, George.
George Rossetti, former Director of Policy of the Congress of Racial Equality of California. You realize that 150, 250,000 kids from LA Unified don't go to school every day? Why do you think this is getting driven by? You people don't do your homework. That lady back there and that man, they know. I was an invited partner of the former Citizens Advisory Board and worked with Baca for 6 years to clean up the jails. Then they illegally put me in there 2 times. Oldest guy in the Twin Towers 2 times. Saved a man's life while they're yelling at me to let him die. They named me OG of OGs. Now, if all when we go under the law, You people will all be in a federal prison for wasting federal funds. In fact, there's a potential Keith Tam suit on here. Do you realize that the DA is illegally prosecuting 3.6 million misdemeanors illegally? And that the DA and everybody else has gone against the DOJ agreement, 31,000 dead people, mostly black and brown? Now, Tori back here I've known for a long time. She knows her stuff. The people worked on the old Citizens Advisory Board. Not like these fools now that don't know nothing. Why you people can't have money? Why don't you tell us right here today, we won't build any more $600,000 units? Mr. Pizzetti, we want to get as many people off the street as possible, and we're going to shop like you do, and we're not going to spend a damn penny more than we have to. We're going to throw those filthy pig contractors in the trash can and have them prosecuted like Englander is right now, and that's why we brought the DOJ in here, because if you don't watch your butts, people, I might get lucky again and have all of you going down there. And believe me, they won't treat you in the Twin Towers like they did me, because you have no history in civil rights. Let me tell you something that's amazing when you go in there and they treat you well. You'll be dead.
All right.
Because they hate you.
That concludes item 8 on our agenda. Is that the last public comment, Rowena?
Yes, for item 8.
Thank you.
Are you going to stop building for a lot of money?
All right, so we're going to move on to item 9 on our agenda, which is the future meeting schedule. So this is just an item for discussion. We won't be taking any action on this today, but some of the discussion that we've been having at these meetings, there's often a continued thread that carries over. And when we first launched this board, we decided, I believe at the time, to meet quarterly. I think initially we might have been meeting every other month, and then we decided to meet quarterly and have more robust meetings once a quarter. But wanted to get feedback from both of you today on your thoughts on the meeting frequency, if it feels like it's meeting the need and we're able to discuss everything we need to once a quarter, or if we wanted to consider a more frequent meeting schedule, which I know can be challenging to coordinate, but potentially a bit shorter, something like every other month versus a longer meeting once a quarter. So would love both of your feedback on that.
There's a lot of information to go through and to discuss, so I'm fine with every other month meeting.
I think we're at a good spot right now. I would put more to the staff. I think it needs to put as much or more of a burden on them and their schedules. So unless Phil's raising his hand for meetings every 2 months, I would like to hear staff's thoughts on meetings more frequently.
Well, I mean, sort of we're here sort of to support the Citizens Oversight Advisory Board in the execution of your responsibilities in whatever way that you think is, most appropriate. If you were talking about meeting every week or every 2 weeks, then I might raise a concern about that. But a shift from 4 meetings a year to 6 meetings a year, it would not be a concern for us from a workload standpoint. I mean, we do have a load of work to do for sure, but the sort of interest in supporting your work and your contribution would outweigh that. So it's really whatever your preference, within the range of what you're talking about, every 2 months versus every 3 months.
I think what supports every 3 months is that we are provided with staff reports at least weekly, and I pay attention to those, and I think that's how I keep abreast of what's going on. The board's doing a lot of things, the staff are doing a lot of things on this issue, and they're keeping us informed as commissioners so that we can come here more prepared every 3 months.
And I think the quarterly report still makes sense. We want to be able to look at consistent reports year after year for the continuity, so it's not like it would be requiring you to do an additional, this type of report.
Right, I'm not off. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we are in a quarterly schedule for the data reporting and the rest of what's in the quarterly report. And I would not envision that changing in response to a changing your meeting schedule.
And is it are we able to survey our fourth member to also hear his perspective on this offline? Is that within our...
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. So I think for now, we can maybe keep our June meeting and have a discussion on whether or not following that more frequent meetings would be helpful to the work. We can look at what's coming up on our agenda. One challenge we've had is at every meeting, there are more things that we would like to discuss than there is time to discuss them. We're generally bumping one or two things off the agenda and deferring to the next meeting. So that's one reason this question came up. And maybe we can get creative with it, with a few different options. Okay. All right. So any public comment on that item?
No, we don't have any public comment on number 9.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Well, then, if there's nothing further, we will adjourn. Thank you all again for being here today. Please take care of yourselves and each other, and we will see you in a couple months.
Oh, so you're going to have a meeting in a couple of months? You're going to kick it up to one every 6